So I came here 2014 and have seen Dubai change many times over.
Day and night, isn't it?
Yeah, not like you. I mean, but I feel like I've gotten one or two runs of Dubai redefining itself.
Exactly.
Especially with COVID and stuff again. And now I think is a really interesting period because, we're going to talk about innovation.
Yeah.
I feel, in 2008, Dubai attracted a lot of people that potentially were laid off in their home countries, and people were looking for a new beginning and coming here. They spoke good English and they got a job somehow, right? But it probably wasn't the type of people that were really pushing innovation and pushing for things to be done in a new way here. They just want to get a job and have a better life.
With true growth.
Exactly. And then in COVID, or throughout COVID, I had many people coming from Canada, the US, Singapore, from all sorts of different places in the world. And people that really reflected on their situation of sitting at home, not being able to do anything, and their home countries potentially not doing a great job in handling COVID. Coming here for a visit, 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then saying, hey, actually, why am I going back? I can do my business from here. I can start a new business here. And then we had the wave of Delta virus, which hit India really bad, and a lot of people came. Then we had the wars that brought more people here, right? But then at some point, there were a lot of people that are actually very educated and very risk takers in their home country and entrepreneurs in their own being, that then started settling down here, or coming not just every quarter, but every month. And the company that I work for, our founder, actually, he says now he has more meetings in Dubai than in London.
Oh,
so
wow.
it just tells you.
So the quality of the talent just
exactly
risen higher than ever before.
In my opinion, now in the latest wave, there's a different type of caliber of people that are coming in that really want to innovate, and they don't care from where it is anymore. I know this region has this reputation of lack of talent, right? For a long time, this was always the
stigma, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, to a degree, it's true. If you work in tech, for example, and you're trying to hire top tech talent,
that's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
I agree.
But I feel now Dubai has positioned itself so well to capture this new wave. Because if the innovators come here, at some point, the tech talent will also come, right? And I mean, we can list all the negative things, but at the same time, we have got governments here in the Gulf that are really trying to diversify away from oil and gas and push innovation and entrepreneurship as much as they can, right?
It's actually the top of their agendas for Saudi 2030, we the UAE 2031, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, everybody. Like if you look at their number one strategic objective is diversifying away from natural resources into innovation, newness, and creating economic stability through diversification, practically speaking. So you're right, absolutely.
And, creating incubators and the space for people to rent hot desks and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of like the first step.
Facilitation,
right?
Of those, yeah.
Exactly. And then there's the funding aspect,
Capital, yeah.
There isn't as many VCs here, and VCs behaved in a different kind of manner. And then the whole kind of 2022 finished, and 2023 kind of stopped all the funding, right? Yeah. But the government is still there. The government is still there to support in all sorts of different sectors and trying to bring talent in. And I feel now is kind of like this inflection point where people have all the basics are there. The foundation is there. If you want to innovate, you don't have to go somewhere else anymore. And, with the whole remote kind of working environments, it's may not be as necessary to have everyone on the ground here. And it may actually be smarter to build a team from here, potentially with kind of the heads here and not the whole team here, but people all across the world, the same as people in Europe and in the US are doing.
Exactly. And I think let's go back one step to just redefine what is innovation, because I have a problem with this word. it's overused. It's a buzzword. It's more for marketing, PR, events. You put the name innovation next to anything, and then people think that it is the next big thing. But then you get disappointed and then frustrated, and then you lose trust in this word. So what does innovation mean? Is it just generation of bright ideas, radical ideas that can be done? What is innovation, in your opinion?
I mean, innovation to some degree isn't just doing something completely new, right? A lot of the times innovation happens by looking at two different things and saying, hey, if I put them together, we could do it this way, right? And I feel actually in this region, we're really privileged that a lot of us travel extensively around the world, right? And we pick up ideas. I mean, I've dibbled and dabbled in F&B, right? And in Dubai or in the UAE, you can find every restaurant there is under the sun, right? And that's usually people that have gone somewhere and said, oh, this is really cool. Let me bring this here, right? And so this isn't really innovation. That is kind of like copying something that works in a different world, but bring it here, right? And then if you look at the same kind of in the tech sector, I mean, we had Uber and then we had Kareem, right? We had Amazon, we had Souk. So we have these kind of early concepts which work in other parts of the world, which we have brought here. And now the next step is really looking at, okay, what can we do that is really unique and start with an innovative approach, which is tailored to the region that can help us put ourselves on a global map. And I think that's where the government, and we need this success story here still that has come from nothing and been made in a desert.
So I like what you said about Souk and Kareem, and those are the unicorns of the region. Those are the pride of any entrepreneur that calls themselves starting from Dubai or from the GCC. The way I think of it is, why only these handful, like radical innovation that has changed paradigms around the world in any industry? Call it fintech, biotech, edutech, call it retail, call whatever industry you are. It's mostly we're perfect consumers of innovation, like you mentioned. We're optimal, and that's not an easy thing. I mean, this place is, that's why the lifestyle here is perfect. That's why it's a talent magnet. People would love to come and live here. But then the exploitation of these novel ideas that then can offer value to people in a way that changes the way they live their lives. That creation of this little idea that then transforms into a value that then people are willing to pay money for it because it changes their lives. Why is it scarce?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, part of it I think is in your description that it's the perfect lifestyle here, right? So if you come from a background where it's not a perfect lifestyle, where you don't have tax-free income, where you don't have sun every day in the year, right? And where you really have to find a way out of your situation, maybe your drive to create something, to innovate, to get out of your situation is higher than the drive here. I don't know. I mean, that could be one of the factors, right? Education is another factor. If you look at the universities and if you look at the education system, it is not where other parts of the world are,
Not on
right?
par with that.
Most people finish school here and then send their kids abroad to go and study somewhere, right? And I think that is changing as well. If you look at, my kids go to school here. There's a number of these schools now that are ranked top 100 in the world, right? And that's not just a badge of, good marketing where Dubai is really good at, right? But if you look at the school system here, I mean, what my kids are going through now is much, much better than what I had in school in Germany, right? So I feel education is picking up. If you look at, some of the AI kind of things which are happening in Abu Dhabi, which are happening in other parts in the GCC, we're really at the frontier of pushing, with Core 42, G42 in Abu Dhabi. They're really pushing in the medical space, in the school space. There's so many small aspects where we can see, it's starting. It's getting much better, and I feel maybe we're a couple years away from it still. But if the education system gets better, and if we get a way to give people drive and instill that drive in them to really go for it, then I think there's a good breeding ground for it.
It is. And the drivers for innovation, and I love how you mentioned that you have the government, you have capital, you have talent, but then there's one missing part that I think I want to delve a little deeper with you on, simply because, like I said, you were born and raised in Germany, in Europe, and you might have an interesting perspective on, which is culture. And when I say culture, I don't mean just national culture, I mean also corporate cultures, which are two different concepts. Now, let's start with the national culture. So the GCC, the way they're set up, and like you said, governments are at the forefront of investing and pushing and facilitating. But is that healthy? Is that enough? What do you think?
I mean, that's what the environment gives you, right? We have rich governments that need to diversify, and it is not easy to raise funds from these governments. Yes, they have the mandate to just, take Saudi Arabia, 38 billion into gaming, right? That's a crazy figure, right? But they know that entertainment is really important, and Saudis at the forefront of consuming, they also want a part of it, right? I think the governments have become more sophisticated in choosing what projects to go after. But to answer your question, is that good or not? It's just...
Is that enough? It's obviously it's good. I mean, we want everybody. It's like the PPP concepts, right? Public-private. The missing piece is the private. It's those entities. It's those people. Like you said, why don't we have VCs that are aware of how to invest in startups and have actual trust and understand the J-curve, understand the risk-taking, understand that not every investment that you will do will actually have any return. On the contrary, it's not gambling, but it's a different game. That is it missing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's still in its infancy. I mean, if you look at, there are players from around the world taking much more notice after the Kareems and the Souks and coming in, right? I mean, Sequoia had the India arm invest in the UAE in a number of different ventures, right? So there are global players coming. I think there were a lot of these global players that were trying to raise funds here to deploy in the West. And that, I think from an LP perspective, people have stopped and said, no, if you're raising, you need to also, deploy.
Local LPs from local VCs?
No, global LPs.
Global LPs, okay.
No, global VCs trying to get local money, but to deploy outside.
Outside,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Which is part of it. But I think the LPs here have said, no, if you need to deploy here as well, right?
Okay.
And I think that is bringing more people in, which will be interesting, because they have the expertise. They have done this many times, and they maybe have a different risk profile than what the local ones here are familiar with, right? So hopefully in the next couple of years, we see more, not just government initiative towards funding, but also some international people coming here and developing the region even more.
And that's another cultural element that I want to discuss with you as well. And it's your observation that I'm looking at. Obviously, everything is our opinions. But the thing is, why are we looking for externals? And by externals, I don't mean people not from this part of the world. You and I are not from this part of the world, right? We're not from the GCC. And yet, we live here. We contribute to the economic prosperity and growth in this part of the world. What is the reason for us to look? And we have capital, we have talent, we have governments that support and facilitate, we have education, like you said. So what is the reason for us to look for external entities? And what are those external entities going to contribute to what's here?
Good question.
What do you think?
I mean, maybe we shouldn't look anywhere else, right? I mean, there is enough funding, and maybe we should just get started without thinking about, we need something else. We need something else. We've got it pretty good here, right? I mean, if you go back to the West, there's very little government initiatives that are as large as the ones here, right?
Exactly.
So we have government. We don't have as much of a developed VC kind of world, but we still have something.
Do you have experience with VCs with different risk profiles here?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a number of different players here.
And do you have like can you juxtapose between here and let's say Europe?
Not Europe, but the US.
The US, okay,
So
even better.
In 2019, I was about to raise, or I was trying to raise for a startup to do in the US, and speaking to people in Silicon Valley and trying to raise funds from them. You know, we landed, and within a couple of days, we had a meeting, and that guy said, "I want to introduce you to 3 other guys." You went to their office 2 days later, and they make decisions much faster. Right? Whereas here, it's getting to know you, having another conversation, and then this partner, and you could have any kind of idea. It's the environment has also changed, right? More recently, it got much harder to raise funds. Here.
Okay.
No, I mean in general.
Oh, in general, of course.
In general, the climate has changed, but I don't think the VCs are VCs. It's more, now family offices are coming online, and a lot more people want to get into entrepreneurship or into funding startups because we have had these success stories. The problem is they don't really have the experience on how this works, right? And a lot of the times, traditionally, people in this region have invested heavily in real estate, right?
Yes.
Or something where there is a government bond, where there's kind of like a guaranteed return, right?
And that's basic.
Yeah, that's basic. But then you are trying to now go from basic to one of the most complicated, volatile kind of asset classes, right? So if you don't have that experience, it's very difficult to speak the same language.
Yes, and this is where culture come into play, right? This is something that organically will grow within a society where it's wealthy people who have, let's say, who are sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars or dirhams, now coming to know that, hang on a minute, if I actually invested in, let's say, Souk.com or in Kareem, I could have been a billionaire by now, but I didn't. So let me go and try. But here's the catch. I had horror stories. Well, we can classify them as funny stories as well, where investors actually invested in some startup, but then on a Monday morning, 8 a.m., that investor is standing at the door of that startup saying, "Hey, why are you late?" So what gives?
Yeah.
Do you have any stories around that?
The problem is in any ecosystem when you're starting, there's always some players that take advantage of this knowledge gap, right? And there are unfortunately cases where people have raised a lot of money and the next day they were gone, right? Startups were gone. And maybe not just because they had to go down, but because of bad management, right? So I think fraud. Okay. And there's still this hesitation, right? There is not the maturity in the market to know, okay, this team has delivered many different, or he has tried 10 different times, and he's a good operator, and I'm going to invest in him because I believe that there's going to be some kind of outcome. There's a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, a lot of people that, maybe haven't got the managerial capabilities to actually run a startup from
outside of the technical skills.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And that usually scares off investors.
One of the reasons, yes.
One of the reasons.
But I wanted to talk about this risk profile, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I work in brokerage, and brokerage, gives you access to the financial markets. And I've worked in the UK and German market. I've had exposure to Asia and here in the Middle East the last 10 years. And if you look at the people here in the UAE, they're some of the most risk-taking people in the world.
Really?
Yes. So let me give you an example.
Yes, please.
I mean, I don't want to talk about crypto. I want to talk about before that, right?
Okay.
But if you look at when the market gets volatile, the people here in the UAE and in Saudi, they go into the market. Whereas Germans, Swiss people, they pull out of the market. They wait for calmer waters, right? Here and in Singapore, they go in. They're risk takers. Okay. Generally,
when everybody's selling, you mean?
No, when everything is volatile, they want more risk. They go into the market. Okay. Here in Singapore, very similar kind of markets. Okay. Whereas in Europe, they're much more conservative and they're waiting for things to calm down, right? So from that aspect, there are a lot of people that are big risk takers, and it's in our culture and in our blood. A lot of people run their own businesses.
That's true.
Right? My parents were like this, and I'm sure you know of many examples.
100%.
People don't actually want to work for someone else. They want to have their own business, right? So from a risk profile, people are actually quite known to risk. It is, I think, this aspect of giving someone else money to do a business is very foreign to us. Like, I think it's strange to ask someone else, oh, I need some money to start this business, right? That's not culturally how we're, I don't know. It's just a weird concept. Whereas in the US, there's no problem. I mean, someone goes and asks for $1 million, they get the $1 million, they lose the $1 million, and they will ask again, right?
And they will
and they will get it again, right? I mean, look at WeWork and the founder of, he has lost a lot of money and now he's gone to raise hundreds of millions again, right? I think there's a cultural element to this where we need to get over this. Like, you're trying to create a business, you're trying to create an outsized return for an investor. You shouldn't feel awkward asking from a cultural perspective.
When people ask, what is the first thing that comes into a VC's mind, or someone, an angel investor, anyone who wants, like, let's say I'm asking you for money. What traditionally comes into your mind the first thing? Is it, have I done my due diligence? Is it my personality, my past experience? Is it the idea? What's the first thing that usually VCs in this part of the world check?
I mean, that all depends on the stage, right? If you're a seed or someone that doesn't have a product yet, it's all about the team, and it's all about, are these people capable of bringing this idea alive and executing on the idea, right? If you're later, further down the line and you're raising a Series A or Series B, then it's much more about, product market fit and have they got something here that can get really big, right? So I think it depends on the situation, what someone is looking for. But, the VCs here in the region, they're catching up fast, and there's a lot of people that are very bright. And but I still think that this cultural thing of like building a connection with a human is really prevalent in this region and is an important aspect.
Do you think the basics of asking for money and giving money and the due diligence behind it, so the team, the market, the product, the idea, the past experience, all of those elements, do you think it's synchronized between the VCs and the entrepreneurs? Do you think they talk the same language, or do you think that the entrepreneur just understands how the product works from an engineering or coding perspective, but then everything else around that is something that is, like you said, they don't know anything about it. And then those people as well, they want to have as quick of a return, exit, as quick of a outcome or growth as possible without taking into consideration the other dynamics, the complicated elements of this part of the world, especially that most of the entrepreneurs are not even from this part of the world, and the complexities that come with it. So what do you think the fit between both?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important thing, right? If you don't speak the other person's language, then it's very difficult to communicate. That's not just language-wise, if an Arab speaks to an Arab in Arabic, it's a different conversation than if you're speaking in English and someone is not as comfortable in English, right? It's the same principle applies to a VC speaking to someone that wants investment and may not be as familiar with, TAM and CAC and LTV and all those acronyms. If you don't speak the same language, it's difficult to come to a common denominator.
So what's your advice? I mean, is it to VCs? Is it to entrepreneurs? Which one is lagging behind, or is it both?
No, I don't see it in that way. I feel if you're an entrepreneur and you really want to push boundaries and you've got a great idea or you've got early kind of traction somewhere, you will find someone that will back you because the money is there. Then it comes down to, have you spoken to hundreds of people, or have you spoken to 5, 6, 10 here? It's at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, and at some point you will find someone that will be interested.
You will find someone.
Yeah, I think so.
Because capital is obviously available here, and there's plenty of people that would like to. It's just knowing those people and knowing what makes them tick, right? But then I want to circle back something you mentioned, which is the awkwardness of asking for money and the awkwardness of giving money with, I might lose it. The control element, and this is what you mentioned, the control element. There's an element in our culture where I need to know everything about everything, and it's difficult for me to delegate or to go sleep at night not knowing where did this go or where did that go. What do you think about that?
Yeah, control is a big problem. I mean, if you're not ready to give up control, then you shouldn't be investing in someone else's business, right? You should just stay with the business that you have clearly made successful. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have the means to invest in someone else, right? But that is one of the first things that you learn in business, and it's very difficult to become very, very successful if you don't know how to delegate and how to build a team around you and how to trust other people, right? That's the same thing with investing. If you don't look for people that have similar kind of skills that can build a team and can really execute, it will be difficult for you to go beyond your own kind of business.
Because I have two friends of mine, both of them are investors. I'm not going to say where they're from, just to kind of not label their cultures. But one said, I know for a fact that probably I'll invest in 20 startups and I'll only have one exit, and the rest of the 19 will just go. But that one will pay for not just those, but for my future.
Well, I can tell you they're not from this region without knowing them, because that is the mindset of people from outside, and that's for people that have done this many times and they have maybe seen an exit before, where you know that one or two return the fund and then some.
And then the other other friend of mine, actually, I was having a dinner with him the other day, and he actually gave up on the whole idea of investing. Although he's well off, obviously, he's an investor. Mm-hmm. But he just gave up. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to stick with, crypto. I mean, to him, crypto is even, more stable than entrepreneurs, which blew my mind. And we had this heated debate and discussion. But yeah, it goes back to experience. It goes back to maturity. But most importantly, it goes back to education on that part of investment. And I was having this discussion with this firm here, which tries to raise money on behalf of investors, and they're saying the same thing that you're saying. So what's the solution? I know that's why I said governments are far more mature, and that's what makes this part of the world a little bit weird, because usually governments are the institutionalized, bureaucratic, lagging behind, and everybody's like, come on, catch up. Here it's the other way around.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
I can only give you my own experience around this, right? I came here, I had a couple years under my belt, and I started doing dibbling and dabbling into investing, angel investing, right? And I made every mistake that you can imagine, from trusting people too early that turned out to be scams, gave them money, or not really looking after the team and finding out how good the team is, gave them money, didn't go anywhere. And, I've done this now maybe 8 or 9 times, right? And of these 8 or 9 times, 7 have died, right? 7 have died, 1 is still going, and 1 was a good, or 2 are still going, and 1 was a really good success.
That's
right?
a very good ratio, isn't it?
That's a very good ratio. To me, I look at it from a perspective of, if I lose this 10, 20, 30K, whatever I've invested, I can make that money back, right? But if there's an outsized return, then that will pay for all the bad investments and then a bit more on that, right? So I think that risk profile is something that not everyone has. And like you said, your friend, he's now kind of stepping back and saying, I know what I know. I'm going to stick with what I know. And that's also fine. It's not for everyone that they need to go down this route. But the people that decide, I'm going to go down this route, they just need to be a lot more open to, there's going to be failures there. And that's fine. That's part of the game. You can't prevent a failure. Yes, you're going to do your due diligence. But even with all the due diligence of the world, you're still going to end up with failing businesses. And that's normal. You know, you just,
Exactly.
instead of, I feel a lot of the times people also go in and say, this one sounds amazing. I'm now going to not give him 25K, but I'm going to give him 200K, right?
Okay.
Because they're so convinced at the time, this is the real business. Then they take a 200K check, and then usually his check size is 25 or whatever, right? That 200K doesn't work out. You need a lot more of the 25K to work out to make back the 200K, right? So like staying diligent and saying, I'm gonna, whatever your figure is, $10,000, $25,000, whatever it is, stick to that, and then just diversify and have enough eggs in your basket so that there's something that can come out of it, right? Because if you only do 3, the likelihood of one of them working out is much smaller than if you have done 10.
So I'll ask you a slightly sensitive question.
Go on.
And, I'll see how you'll respond. Is it because that most people here haven't done it before and they're wealthy, not because they took that route?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm one of them, right? I came here, I earned tax-free money for a while, and then you've got disposable income, and then you think about what am I going to do with this income, right? You can buy real estate, you can, you know, go the traditional kind of route, or you take a bit more risk. And you know, the people that have worked really hard in this region and have built big businesses, they're obviously also protective of their money, right? Because they've worked really hard to get to that level.
They understand. And they have a different coach's, I call it coach's eye, because you can see where things would go wrong. And you have this intuition or gut feeling that is almost razor sharp, that you and I probably haven't done it yet, like you said. Difficult to spot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Probably it's just a matter of time, like you said. I love the way you look at things and how you say that the foresight is positive. The future, the forecast of how things will shape up here is clear, simply because we have the infrastructure, from facilitation to government to talent to capital, to culture that is being changed, and that's at a national level, at a group of people, at a nation's level. But then let's kind of zoom into corporate cultures. And by corporate cultures, I mean cultures that are in companies that have 50, 100, 200 plus employees with more than 5 years of lifespan. How do you think the corporate culture here, and what's your experience with that?
In towards innovation, or?
Generally speaking, I mean, when I say corporate culture, it's the collective programming of the mind that makes a group of people distinct from others. So when you go to company A, you can sense a certain way that they're behaving, they're communicating, they're responding, they're feeling. Others, their different way of communicating, behaving. So you send an email to someone, he responds or she responds in a different way, and so on and so forth. And then we'll talk about how that affects innovation and affects creativity and affects employment, entrepreneurship within an organization. But what's your experience with organizations in this part of the world, and how they behave and how they manage the hierarchy, the control, all that stuff within an organization?
That's a definitely loaded question. In my opinion, there's loads of different factors. I mean, if you look at hiring, that's, where it all starts. If you look at, what are the hiring practices here, and how many rounds of interviews do you have? How much vetting goes into this versus nepotism and you're going to get the job because you're XYZ, right? Favoritism and all of this. So that's the first thing that I think.
But how's that different from anywhere else in the world? I mean, from let's say the West, the East, you're from this part of the world, you're from that part of the world. I mean, and I hear what you're saying, and I've read many papers talking about nepotism, which is hiring your own people, despite of them not having the qualifications, or having someone that is less qualified, but because he's X or Y or she's X or Y, you hire them. So
it's not really different to other parts of the world.
Okay.
But in my opinion, in other parts of the world, there are, especially with the bigger kind of companies, when you get to 200, 300 kind of people, there are more rigorous kind of recruiting practices where talent is vetted a lot more in advance. And if companies don't adopt that, then that will show in innovation, in the outcomes of people that are within your
The market
company.
will speak.
Exactly, the market will speak. And I mean, we have seen this in a number of different rounds where then there were a lot of layoffs and a lot of people had to go, right? And so that for me is the first factor. The second factor is you always get what you pay for. That's one thing that I've learned the hard way, and I think is really true, that top talent will cost you money. So if you're trying to cut corners and not pay market rate, then it will be very difficult for you to retain the best kind of people in the region.
You pay peanuts.
Yes.
You get monkeys. You better have monkey bars.
Yes.
You see, and that's one of the things. I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, it's very hard for me to see, and I love what you're saying, because you look around and then you see the boss who is clearly well off and well paid. And then you see his direct reports and you can almost immediately infer or kind of conclude what's their pay.
Yeah.
There is like this funny gap.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Maybe sometimes people don't hire with succession in mind, and don't hire with, one thing that someone told me very early in my career is, if you want to move up in corporate life, you got to make sure that you've got a number two that can replace you. Because if there's no one that can replace you, how can your boss promote you to the next kind of level, right? And I feel a lot of the times people actually hire people around them that are weaker than them, so that their job isn't necessarily in danger, right? Which is the wrong approach. You want to be the least smart person in a room so that you can progress and you can get better, right? But it's difficult to do this. But that's something that
Why is it difficult?
Because then you are shown your shortcomings on a daily basis, right? And you really have to do better to keep up and to push the company forward, which is what, as an entrepreneur, it's a different story, right? Yeah. As an entrepreneur, you want the best people working for you because it's your company, right? But if you're a corporate manager and you're hiring a team, it may not be in your best interest, right? That's maybe how some people think.
There's a conflict of interest between your interests and the company's interests, and then you're looking for your next hire, and whether you have the spotlight and not, and your LinkedIn has how many likes because of whatever.
Exactly. So I think that's where we just need to get better in hiring the right kind of teams around us to really push ahead and not be afraid of competition.
In light of what you just mentioned, that's theory. Because if we have this tacit, this inherent culture, which is it's me, not the company's best interest.
That's bad.
Everything else is theory.
Yeah.
Because I'm the one who's hiring, I'm the boss. I'll make sure that anyone who's hired is A, low paid, so my P&L looks nice. B, he's not as talented, because otherwise if he's low paid and talented, guess what? 6 months down the line, he'll rebel and then he'll go. Thirdly, I need to make sure that I shine, and I can shine at the expense of others.
Yeah, but that's the mindset of people that want to stay in their job and not really progress, right? I mean, okay, if that's your aim, and there are a lot of people like that, right? They come into the corporate world, say, oh, I'm happy here. I've got my brunches on the weekend. I've got a good life for the family here. Why would I push the boundaries, right? But at the same time, there are a lot of people that want to progress and want to get better. And those people, they need to be held accountable to, hire the right talent around them and create opportunities for other people. As a leader, you've got this responsibility to give other people a chance that maybe early on didn't have a chance in their career. You give them early opportunities, but then when you see someone that has the attitude and the aptitude to move on and get higher, then it's your responsibility to put them in a place to get that opportunity.
But as board of directors, if the CEO has that epidemic, if the CEO has that have these symptoms, how do you solve it in an organization? And again, we're talking about, let's say, we're not talking about government here, obviously, right? We're talking because governments here are at the pinnacle of performance, of service, of quality, and obviously it's evident. Like no one can dispute that. But we're talking about family businesses. We're talking about private sector. We're talking about companies that are not related to the public sector, who are profit driven. They have board of directors. They have people who are above the CEO, who's the executive person. But if the CEO is the person who's actually having these symptoms, what do you think people should do?
Well, the board should remove the CEO.
How would they know? What's the symptoms that they should look for in a company that has these traits?
I mean, it usually shows in the numbers, right? The numbers won't lie. I mean, okay.
Is it?
Yeah, well, you can grow. Yeah. Let's say a good example is the company is still growing. Everyone is kind of happy, but then you see other competitors which are outgrowing you, and other business, like the general business climate, which is much better than your current situation. And people start making excuses, and so I think people can hide obviously for some time, but at some point it comes out, and the CEO maybe was happy for a couple of years, and then they move on. But usually it comes out, and maybe the row below the CEO then has the responsibility to let the board of directors know
about that.
Yes.
It's easier said than done, but yeah, I agree with you.
It definitely is. But if I'm in the situation that I've got an executive team that isn't performing as it should be, then it's your responsibility as well to, you may step on some people's toes and you may be getting rid of, but if you're compliant and quiet, then that doesn't help you or the company as well.
Exactly. So the detriment of everyone involved. The other observation that I recently had is you look at multinational companies, let's say Cisco, IBM, consulting companies like the Big Four, the Big Five, and you find that most partners and most executives, especially at the highest levels, they have 10, 20, 30 years of tenure. You look at local companies here, and the head of the company is just 1, 2, 3 years in. And you look at his profile and you'll find him jumping from one company to the other, from this CEO of this company to that CEO of that company. Is this a telltale of some sort?
Yeah.
Or am I reading too much into things?
No. I mean, that can definitely be the case. I mean, it's obviously an individual kind of situation, but yeah, people here in this region, they may not have as much experience, especially on an international level. And it takes time to build this and have people stay in the region for long enough so that you have got at the top executive level people that have more experience. But at the same time, the question is, do we want that? Is that really serving people the right way, that you have 20 years experience and you kind of, when you get to that kind of tenure, you're usually less risk taking and are more comfortable kind of in your job and in your day-to-day, right? We want people that push this region further. So maybe we want talent that is less experienced but more open to change and more ready to tackle the challenges of this region.
So change. We talked about culture and how culture is a bit different, let's say, in this part of the world than others. And I talk about corporate culture and the way, let's talk, these are the leadership that are, that are plagued with nepotism and favoritism. And those are ones that obviously they need to be spotted out, they need to be singled out, and they need to be removed and extracted. The others who are genuinely good and they want to do good within their organization, they have their organization's best interest at heart. I think my observation is they do strategy, they do operations, they do technology and back end and front end, they do customer experience, they do all of that. The one thing that they don't have deliberate focus on is their corporate culture. They don't know how to architect a corporate culture. What do you feel about that?
I mean, culture is the most important thing, right?
It eats strategy for breakfast, right?
It's cliche, but if that is not true, then I don't know what is true. I mean, for building a great culture, right, and building a team that really works together, that is one of the hardest things, and that oftentimes doesn't get taken into consideration when people build a team. people don't put enough emphasis on, okay, I'm going to hire this person, this person, this person. Are they actually going to work well together, or are they lone wolves, right? And building a team there together to make sure that culture is the best that it can be, that really helps you when there's tough times, when we want to push ahead with something. Like, I can tell you
It's okay.
I can tell you an example where I've had people that worked for me that are not the brightest, but because they really believed in the mission and in the culture, they would answer their phone at 11 p.m. at 1 a.m. in the morning to a client. When you see this, and they would sacrifice their evenings, their weekends. If you see this or ask this of someone in the West, they will throw you out, right? Whereas here, it's completely normal. Like, when I first came here, I really struggled with, being half German. I really struggled with coming to work and kind of like starting at like 9:30, 10, right? And that was in finance, right? Whereas in London, I used to get in and be at my desk at 7:15 and it was go.
No
right?
questions asked.
But here, like at 10, people get going. And then they would have a coffee break and a cigarette break and a long lunch. And I'm like, I get so frustrated at the beginning, right? But at the same time, those are the same people that at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10, until 1 a.m. in the morning, they would answer their phone and be there and answer things which, in the opposite way, in Europe, no one would, like 5 o'clock, you're out,
Clock out, that's it, you switch off.
Exactly. So I think there's a cultural aspect to this. If you can build this here, if you can build a good culture in your company, then people are really willing to put in time, slightly different time zone during the day, but they will put in the time and they will work hard to make things happen.
So let's talk about that culture, right? And how leaders and what leaders should do. And obviously being a leader of your organization, multiple organizations before, what are those, what is the characteristics of this culture and how can a leader architect them?
I think one of the most important things is actually taking interest in the human, right? In your employee, and not just saying, I'll hire you, do this job and leave me alone, right? But actually taking a genuine interest. And like, one thing that in this culture here is amazing is sharing food, right?
Right.
I mean,
I agree.
It used to be, at my first place where I worked here in the Middle East, we used to go once a week to Sharjah to buy mendi,
Oh, wow.
bring it back to the office and have 15 people eat mendi together in the office, right?
That's a nice culture.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's mendi or whatever we were eating, but this sharing a meal together and kind of like having small talk and going beyond just the work kind of environment.
The dry business talk,
yeah, exactly. That builds relationship and builds trust. And the CEO was eating with us, and everyone was there, right? Everyone comes on a level playing field, and I think that is one thing that can contribute to something like this. But then the same thing, in one-on-one chats with your employees, you can't just. I'll give you another example. One of the first times I went onto a business meeting here with a very wealthy man, I went with the relationship manager and I had this presentation of how he can get better returns and whatever, right? In my laptop bag. And we get to the meeting and the guy laughed before the meeting, right? He said, "Oh, what are you doing?" Anyways, I'm there.
The relationship manager.
Yes, I wanna present. I wanna show what I've got, and I've done my due diligence. Coming from the UK, that's pretty normal. And we talk for 55 minutes out of 60 minutes just about his family, his business, how he is, all of that kind of stuff, right? And I'm like, when are we getting to talking about business?
You stayed all night preparing those transitions.
Exactly. And I walk out of the meeting. We obviously didn't look at the presentation once. We talked about business for like literally 2 minutes, and that was it. And that, building those relationships with your customers or with your team, it doesn't matter, right? But being able to being human, right? It's between people. Being able to build that really helps you in tricky situations, and people will come through for you in those situations. And that here is much stronger than in the West.
So this is evident, and I can immediately relate to everything you said. I've never had a meeting with a client where on the dot we start with business talk, preparing the present. No. It has to. We have to have coffee. We have to have tea. We have to talk about everything in life. And God forbid it's a Monday, so the weekend stories is in there, right? And then last 5 minutes we start talking, and this goes back to a basic element in business, which is again another cliche, which is the most valuable commodity: trust.
Yes.
But then you try to build this trust with your clients. And this is obviously the hospitable Arab nature of our national culture. This is why it shines, right? This is why we feel home when this happens. And we like to welcome people and pay for them and fight over the bill. That's what we do. But then what happens with our family members, with our employees? Do we actually trust them, or is it a different story there?
I mean, until the trust is broken, I prefer to trust someone, right? Sometimes
the trust is assumed.
Yes.
Okay.
In my opinion, maybe I don't know, because I'm not fully from here. Maybe
that's probably your German part talking.
Yes, maybe. But I'd like to give everyone a chance, and as long as they deliver, then I don't have any reason to mistrust them. What is important is to set boundaries from the beginning. And to make sure that, especially early on in the relationship, they understand, okay, I may be very friendly with you, but it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to work here.
Don't mix soft with kind, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's still your targets, and that's another thing. Like, personally, I hate micromanagement, right? If someone micromanages me, I get very frustrated, right? And most people in this region, I think, are like that too, where they don't really want micromanagement. And if I give you a lot of leeway to go and explore and do the work in the way that you interpret the work to be done, as long as the numbers and as long as the results speak for themselves, I will never come close to you and say, hey, you're not doing a good job, right? But when you're not hitting your numbers, there's an effort problem, there's an attitude problem, those kind of things, they're warning signs, right? And I will come very quickly and very directly and say, hey, we got to change this. This is not working out in this way, right? So trust goes both ways. Like, if you give someone trust and they misuse this trust, then, you got to go in a different kind of way. But I think starting off with trust and giving someone the opportunity to show what they can do is the right starting point.
So you said that you hate micromanagement, and probably everyone here hates micromanagement until they become managers, and then they start micromanaging. And I've seen this more times than I can even wish to remember, because you find people who are, we grow together 10, 15, 20 years into our professional life. We start together, and then 10 years, 15 years on, they're managers, and now they're doing the same thing that they hated to be done to them in the beginning. Yeah. What gives?
Yeah, I mean, the problem there is when someone has power for the first time, it's difficult to use that power in the right kind of way, right? And that, is management training. That is getting to know what your skill sets are, how you want to be perceived as a manager. But I agree, there are some people that misuse that power and don't know how to use power in the right kind of way. It's a learning curve.
I would say it's not just a learning curve. I would circle back to the first point you mentioned, which is education. People here go to physics, chemistry, math, AI, computer, coding, but then, and even management. They talk about strategy, they talk about marketing, they talk about finance, they talk about hiring and firing and HR and policies and procedures and all that sort of stuff in an organization. And the only thing that they don't get trained on is true leadership, which is what you mentioned now, the ability to let go, probably, the ability to listen to people as individuals, not as profiles or as job functions or as, like, I love what you said about targets and results, and that's 100% true, and there's no buts and ifs about that. It's a business at the end of the day, and it's not a charity. And even if it's a charity, you have to perform, because otherwise the people that you're giving charity to will go hungry. But you mentioned something about attitudes and performance and efforts, but how do you know? Like that's I think the crux of it, because everybody says the same thing. Everybody says that as a leader, I will look for results, and if these results are not achieved because of attitude, because of behavior, because of lack of effort, because of complacency, then trust is taken. But then how do you know?
You can't. I mean, you can do all the interviews that you want to do. People are very good at interviewing these days. And if you've got the aspiration to have 100% track record in hiring, then, you're not going to survive very long. You got to go in there and say, I'm going to give you a chance. And there's a probation period of 3-6 months. If it doesn't work out, you got to cut. And that's also another...
difficult decision.
It's a difficult decision, but it's something that leaders or managers really need to learn to cut, because it's much easier to let someone kind of continue in their role and you have got someone there and not have a difficult conversation and say, hey, this is not working out. Thank you very much. That's it, right? But if you get to like 50-60% of the people that you're hiring to actually stay within the organization and they've worked out for you, and then you have to rehire for the other roles, that's not actually so uncommon, right? So if you've got the right kind of starting point and you know that it may not work out for everyone, but I'm going to give them a chance. I'm going to let them show you. And if they don't show, that they have to go. That's just the way that business is these days. Some people take the opportunity and they're really grateful that someone gave them the opportunity. And some people take advantage of it. And it's your job to identify this as early as possible to get rid of them. Because the worst thing is to keep dead wood within an organization, because that just shows the other people, oh, why is this person being kept? I'm working so hard here. Yeah, exactly. You got to make sure that they're out of the organization very quickly.
But that's the other side of the coin. How do you know? Okay, so you observe, you get signals, data. Let's say you're a computer system. You're getting data from these people, from your employees, whether they're new hired, they've been here for some time. And then your interpreter is interpreting it as if it's complacency, it's, kind of lack of effort. How do you know that your interpretation is actually correct and it's not your assumption being projected?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a process, right? You have to go and communicate. You have to go and, that's why this building trust and talking about things outside of business is so important, right? You have this, and yes, you're building this trust, but you're also learning more about this individual, right? And the more trust you have there and the more kind of conversations you have, hey, what's going on outside of work? A lot of the times the reason why someone is not performing at work is because there's something outside of work that is really affecting them, right? And you may want to cut them some slack at once or twice, but if there's just story after story after story, then at some point you say, hey, I like you, but this is not working out. You're not performing at work. But if you don't have that kind of relationship from the beginning, then it's much, much harder to figure out, is this person performing or is he having a bad day or what's going on here, So going beyond that and having a vested interest, as I said before, will help you in those kind of situations.
In the individual.
Yeah. And then, you need to give enough time to be able to make that decision, right? If you just hire and fire very, very quickly, then you're going to be wrong.
Signal.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to give them enough time to either make enough mistakes or show you enough good kind of things so that you can make an informed decision.
Change and mistakes. So we talked about innovation and how innovation is very important. We talked about the investors and investor entrepreneurship relationship and that world of entrepreneurship and the novelty in creating something new and how you need all these drivers. One of them is capital and culture and the relationship between VCs, investors, and entrepreneurs. And then we went into corporates and then corporate culture and how managers and relationship between leaders and employees. And you mentioned something that if someone stays in an organization for a long period of time, then probably they're not as receptive to change. Now, obviously, this is not a rule, but this is something that nobody would disagree with. Because if it's a rule, then Microsoft wouldn't be where it is right now, changing with its leader being in the organization since literally forever. Same as founders like Steve Jobs and others, and Elon Musk. And so people can stay for a long time and yet accept change, but it doesn't come naturally. It has to happen through education, through accepting failure, and go back to your word, mistakes. So if I ask you now, if someone makes a mistake in your team, what's your reaction to them?
Failure is the most important thing, and I think that is a big mistake in corporates, that we don't encourage enough failure. In startups, it's normal that there will be many, many different failures, and we call it pivots, and but in corporate, it's like, oh no, I made a mistake, am I going to lose my job, right? Whereas, I tried to make as many mistakes or failures as I could throughout my career, because every time you learn something, right? And if you don't push, and if you don't try and make a mistake or try and make something, then you're staying in the safe lane and you don't get that experience to next time do it better, right? And if you have a manager or a corporate culture where failure isn't welcomed and where you kind of have to hide your failures, and that is not good. It's not a good environment. And I feel in this ecosystem, we need to encourage failures more and not kind of hush it and say, now I'm not going to talk about this, and that, because if you go to your manager and you tell your manager, hey, this didn't work out, I tried it, but for whatever reason it didn't work out, and then he has to go to his manager and kind of say, lose face, which in this region is also very important. Like, you don't want to lose face, right?
But face is associated with failure. That's a problem, isn't it?
Exactly. And if you can go beyond this and say, hey, I'm really going to try and improve this aspect of the organization, or I'm going to create more revenue, or whatever your function is, and I'm going to try a couple of times, and one or two is going to work out, right? You're going to be remembered for the ones that are going to be working out, not the hundreds of experiments that didn't work out. I mean, if you look at, Booking.com or like some of the big kind of tech cultures, they have A/B tests and they run experiments on every single day, and they encourage everyone in the organization to place these experiments, because the slightest changes in big organization like this could be, even if it's 1% higher conversion rate, that could mean millions of extra dollars to the bottom line, right? And I think here we need to get better and just encourage people to take initiative and fail until they figure something out.
But then it goes back to micromanagement and control. Can you because if you accept people to fail, you're not micromanaging, because if you're micromanaging, then you're failing and then you're losing face. And then it's very difficult for people to change, because it's a mindset, isn't it? And leaders that don't have this mindset, what do? Because if you don't know what you don't know, if you think, I've spoken to many people that think they're change agents, that think they're change leaders, but then when I observe them in their natural habitat, the first time that any of their employees make a mistake, even if it's a PowerPoint spelling mistake, they just don't accept it.
Yeah.
So how do they know?
Well, it comes back to team, right? It comes back to surrounding yourself with the right kind of people that you can trust to do this. I mean, I don't really have an answer to how someone, if you don't know what you don't know, to step out of your own kind of thought process and look at it from a third person perspective is one of the hardest things that you can do, right? Yeah. And that's just exposure and difficult.
I'll tell you one thing that I've been trying myself, because obviously I don't know what I don't know. So yes, I'm sitting on a high tower and saying, hey, you know what, everybody should be like that. But what if I am the one who's a culprit of my own preaches or my own kind of theories? And one of the things that I always tell my people that are surrounding me, especially my close families, the people that I'm most comfortable with, those are the ones that I tend to not go into character. I become myself around, right? I tell them, the moment you feel I become upset because you challenged me, because you said something against what I'm trying to say, because I've said something based on an assumption and then you challenge that assumption. The moment I actually start defending, arguing, using my position of authority and power to win an argument, highlight it. And then if I don't see it, remind me when I'm sober again.
But you're talking from a perspective of someone that's very progressive, right? You also know our culture, and let's say the father of the house says something.
Yes.
Good luck in challenging him. You know, I mean, if that would come from the father and he said, you know, I want to be challenged, I want to improve, I want to, then it's a different kind of baseline and a different kind of concept. But mostly that's not the case.
Yes, and I want my daughter to call me out. She's 14 years old, turning 15. I always tell her, you know what? If I did a mistake, and I've made her read philosophy books, I've made her read economy books, I've made her read books from Dale Carnegie and those kind of authors. So she has a level of awareness in our world. So I tell her, you know what? Every time I do anything at home, if you think that I'm doing it wrong or I'm doing something wrong, challenge me, and then see how would we react. And to be honest, I'm doing it for myself, but also for her, to raise her and parent her. But going back to work, it's very difficult to be done at work, and I have to give it to all leaders. But that's the only way we can innovate. I mean, if we're not ready to accept change and be challenged, that's how every multinational organization, this is how they grow, and this is how ideas are actually flourishing, creating this psychological safety, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, flattening the organization and not having this, oh, he's the manager and we can't talk to him and we're afraid of him. But the manager actually coming out, doing every job that other people would also do, and kind of putting himself on a similar kind of playing field is really important. Like this whole he's the manager and we are here, that needs to go. You know, otherwise there's no psychological safety.
Exactly, and that's one of the kind of things that corporate cultures. This is one of the things that leaders can look at to architect their own culture, to see those, to put a spotlight on those type of behaviors and traits from his own employees, from his own direct reports. If they treat their own employees with that mindset of I am the boss, you can't challenge me, or if you challenge me, then X and Y is a consequence. One of the consequences could be poker face, you know, just gaslighting, or just, you know, kind of ghosting, or it is something that is very dangerous, because then you're taking away that psychological safety, and that bright idea from this employee that's sitting in the corner might never be surfaced. And then guess how much the opportunity cost that you've lost because of that, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, what came to mind is Jeff Bezos, who said that he will always talk last in a meeting. I mean, if you're in a meeting, right, and you've got 10 people which are clearly below him, they all come with ideas, and if he talks first, then maybe someone says, oh, I'm not going to say my point because his view is this way, right? So listening and not just talking, maybe one way of architecting, you know, and building the right kind of team, that's on you as a leader.
That's from the start,
right?
yeah.
And in my opinion, keeping yourself within that team and not putting yourself above that team is also very important.
Absolutely.
And then letting other people communicate their communicate their ideas, but also kind of push them to bring up and come out with ideas, because everyone has ideas. Everyone goes to work. Everyone can see something in their work that can be improved, right? Taking notes of them and trying to actually listen to them and improve things in the organization. And if it's not possible because there's other conflicting things happening at the same time, also explaining that to the individual.
Yes.
You know, because sometimes from the point where you are sitting, you don't have the same view as the senior leadership, and if no one tells you, then you're just thinking, oh, I'm being ignored, what the hell, you know. So communication is very important there as well.
And that all creates an environment that is conducive of innovation, do you think?
Yes. I mean, if you feel like, you know, I can say anything and it's not going to be shut down, but actually they're listening to me, and it may not be the right timing, or, you know, But they have at least listened, and I'm going to try again. And it's something will be taken serious and will be maybe implemented.
And then if it's not implemented, you know why? Because either it's a company priority, either it's because resources availability, or either because it doesn't align with the future that I as an employee don't see, but my leader sees, and now he explains it to me. Now I know there's a rational discussion between both of us as parties.
And for you as an employee, if this happens to you a number of times and you don't really get hurt, right? You're free to go. It's not like you're married to the company forever. You can always find a better situation for you outside, right? That has happened to me as well, where you just keep trying, and you're just being shut down. And I mean, one of the things that a lot of the times here happens is that you're not the HQ, right? The HQ is somewhere else, right? And being a satellite office, you're always fighting this fight between HQ and us out here, right? And what do these people in Dubai know? You know? And so that has led me to go somewhere else before, because it was just too frustrating.
That's a very interesting point you brought here. And I would love to end on that note, which is to the employees and the option of walking away. There are two elements that cross my mind right now, and I need to kind of see what you think about them. First, courage. So the element of courage to actually consider walking away. This is one. Second, value. So if I think I'm valuable somewhere else, then I should carry some sort of a skill set or a competency that is so high that I know that I'm going to attract other employers. How do you think people feel about those two? Courage and competency.
Yeah. I mean, if you're someone that is pushing new ideas and is trying to help the organization, I think by default, you're someone that is confident in their abilities. And if you're not confident, then you should look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm not coming up with rubbish ideas. You know, they have been challenged, but I really think that this business could be run better with X, Y, Z, right? So you should then have also the courage and say, hey, something is not going right. Yeah, I keep banging my head against the wall, and at some point I got to make a decision here. Otherwise, you know, it's your responsibility. It's not your manager's responsibility anymore, right? You're responsible for your career, for your advancement in your career. So you got to take this matters into your own hand.
But if I have a couple of credit cards and a bank debt and a bank loan, and then I have a couple of schooling that I have to pay every now and then that actually takes 50% of my salary, and then I'm on a visa, and remember, I can't move back to my mother's basement. It's a loss of lifestyle. What do I do?
Yeah, you need to fix that first before you're going anywhere else. I mean, that's. But you got yourself in that situation, right? That has nothing to do with work. I mean, now you're in a bad situation because outside of work, you weren't able to manage your...
Remember the brunches?
Yes, I remember those brunches. And there's many people that unfortunately get sucked into this, right?
Yeah.
But that has to do with...
the curse of Dubai lifestyle, right?
Well, that's personal finance. You don't have to live like this. There's many people also here that don't live like this. But, you know, when you come from outside, the first couple of years in Dubai, you know, you
max those credit cards. The banks are just knocking on your door every day.
Yes.
Crazy.
You know... But you got to fix that first before you give yourself the opportunity to have a better work environment. And you spend the whole day there. So, you know, you should really fix this. But yeah, I mean, you are in a predicament then. And then you're just praying that no one fires you.
How do I fix it?
You go and check your credit card statement and look at what are you spending money on, right? And then cut back. I mean, it's difficult.
Simple.
But at the end of the day...
Yet so difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it's first principles at the end of the day. You know, why am I in this situation? Why is the credit card bill so high? Why? Until you have enough whys and you know the reason, and you stop that behavior.
And that gives you courage. Obviously, if you have zero debt, if you have enough savings and enough runway, that will give you all the courage in the world.
Exactly.
Right? So that solves the first problem, and I love it. Second problem, which is competency.
Yeah, I think that actually takes some time in your career, and it doesn't just come immediately, especially when you're, you know, an entry-level employee or first-time manager. You're still trying to figure things out, right? But if you have stayed in a role, or if you have seen many different kind of scenarios play out, at some point you get enough experience to say, hey, I'm right here, someone else is telling me a lie, or it's because of the situation in the company, whatever it is. But at some point you have enough experience to know this needs to be changed here. I can't sit here anymore. And that for everyone that's different, and that's why it's so important to have these failure points and to have experience. And because if you shy learnings, if you shy away from this, then this experience will take much longer to build, right? Because just sitting there every day and doing emails and back-to-back meetings, that's not actually giving you the experience. But interacting with senior management, proposing new projects, trying to fix a broken process, all of these things, you see how people react. You learn every single time. You may fail to implement what you want to do, but you get these learnings, right? At some point, that helps you to build experience and to build, just resilience, and also the courage then to go back to the first point to say, hey, I'm not standing for this anymore. I need to go and change my situation.
And really have a foresight of your own skill set. If I do an audit of my own skills, what do I know now? What value can I offer to anyone in this world, right? Whether I'm an entrepreneur or an employee. Let's say I'm an accountant. Okay. What are your skill sets that you think deserves a pay raise? Or what if you're a developer, then how am I different than ChatGPT, for example, or AI now coming up with all those kind of tools that can create codes that is obviously much better and much quicker than a human can do. So education, upskilling, making a kind of an annual audit of your own skill set and the value of the skill set in the eyes of employers, people who would really pay money in exchange for this value, correct? Yeah. How do people do that? How did you do it? Let's talk about you.
I mean, that's one of the most important things. If you can't go into a yearly review or into a bonus discussion prepared and say, I did these 16 projects, this is what the return was, and okay, in my world that's very easy to do. But let's say someone in a back office role, in a customer support role, all of these different roles have the opportunity to say, hey, I solved X amount of tickets in Y time, quicker than the others. I improved this process, and this was what it was worth for the company. You have got a very strong argument, and no one can come to you and say, hey, no, that's not true, or whatever, and you're not getting anything out of it. And if they're doing this, then it's maybe with a different agenda, right? And you will see through this at some point. For me, that getting to know, like, what am I actually good at, right? Yeah. For me, it's sales and marketing. Sales and marketing, and improving top of funnel and making sure that the bottom line really improves. And that's numbers. At the end of the day, you can't hide behind those numbers. Either it went up or it didn't go up, right? And sitting down and actually, this is one of the most important things, as you rightly said, like doing this audit on yourself and saying, what am I actually really good at and what am I not good at? Because as a leader or as someone that you want to progress, you need to also know your blind spots, right? You need to know what you're really good at, but if you don't know your blind spots, you can't cover them. And you can't be good at everything, In my opinion, you should be really good at the things that you know well, and then have someone that can cover your weak spots. And if you have that, then you don't feel bad about the blind spots anymore. You just have someone that can help you with them.
Or work on those blind spots and upskill yourself. I mean, this is what time versus effort gets into performance, right?
Yes. So that's an interesting thing, because to me, if you have a blind spot, and yes, you need to improve it. Like, let's say you don't understand a balance sheet. Yeah, you can improve it, but there are people that are just very passionate about balance sheets or finance, whereas you are not someone that is so passionate about it, right? So you get someone that does finance, and they'll help you with it. So upskilling to a degree where you understand it, and someone can't BS you, and you don't understand how to communicate in that language, but you don't need to be the one executing this, right? Whereas your the skill set that you're really good at, you need to be so good at that someone will say, that he is that person and he will do this
Yeah.
for us. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in my world, I've heard it once, I think from Jim Carrey. He said, in my world, there are two types of people. One person who has 1 year of experience, repeated 10 times, and another person who has 10 years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the first person is the one who is so complacent. He did something for 1 year and then he repeated it for 10 years. And then after 10 years, he's asking for a raise. I was like, hang on a minute. Have you been paid? Yes. Have you been paid against what you're doing? Yes. Then why are you asking for a raise? Why are you asking for a higher bonus? But then the other person who has every year an audit to his own skill sets, to his own strengths. And I love what you said. You only focus on your strengths and you outsource the rest. You know enough to get yourself in and out of trouble, but then you don't need to master of everything because there's no way you can be a master of everything. And then you work on those strengths and you develop them to the point where it exceeds the value that you offer, exceeds the compensation that you take in return. And then you go and ask for your pay raise or you ask for your promotion. And guess what? If they say no, because of whatever reason, no judgment there, then you're courageous because remember those brunches, you stop doing them, and your credit cards, you cut them. So you're kind of having all the courage in the world to walk away. But at the same time, you have competencies and you have skill sets that are sought after and they're current and they're futuristic, that you're able to go somewhere else without losing any lifestyle or any sort of damage to your own livelihood and lifestyle. So this is, I mean, we're reaching towards the end of our discussion, and I love this because we started with at the top, with the tycoons, with the investors and the VCs and the entrepreneurs, and then we went to leaders and organizations and corporate culture, and now we're ending with employees who are actually the co-creators, the source of these ideas and innovation. And across the spectrum, there are lots of wisdom I think that you've shared with me, and I really thank you for this. Any last words?
No, I mean, for me, this was a great discussion. I think the region, as I said at some point during our discussion, is at this inflection point where I think if we were to do this discussion in 5 years' time again, we would look back at this and say, the region came out of COVID as, really strong, powerful nations across the GCC, and we have tried and failed many times early on, and now we've got these different unicorns or whatever companies that are really innovative to show for on a global scale. I truly believe that this is possible here and that we're going in the right direction.
Because the alternatives is so scary, isn't it?